All right, good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, so obviously you can hear me. I'm not AI, so I'm really here. So good morning and welcome to City Club's August Forum on AI Under the Big Sky, reviewing the current state of artificial intelligence. I'm Dave Peppinger. I have the privilege of serving as chair of City Club's board of directors. Thank you all for being here today. City Club's mission is to bring people together to form and inspire them on vital issues within our community through public forums and that encourage discussion of new ideas and free exchange of thought. We have a deep commitment to civility and civil discourse, even when discussing challenging issues. Before getting into the forum, let me give some sincere thank yous. First, thank you to Missoula Community Access Television, which records our forums as part of their media assistance grants to nonprofit organizations. MCAT serves our community on cable channels 189 and 190. MCAT occasionally live streams our forums on its local live platform. You can also find videos of past CCM forums by clicking on the video button on our website, cityclubmissoula.com. A special thank you to our sponsors, those at the executive level. Those are Blackfoot Communications and First Security Bank. Our executive level sponsors are key partners in helping to expand audience access and public awareness on upcoming forums. We're also very grateful to our sponsors, and we invite you to join. And of course, special thanks to the board of directors and our administrator, Jenny Rohrbach. She's somewhere back there. Without her, we would struggle to put these on and you would be throwing things at me. So thank you, Jenny. So today's speakers, we have Zach Rossmiller, Sonia Flam, did I pronounce that right? Yep. And Joel Henry down there. So let me get into the bios real quick so we can get into their infinite wisdom. Zach Rossmiller, he's the Chief Information Officer and Research Faculty at the University of Montana. He's been helping lead the effort of AI adoption across campus. Most notably, he helped organize an AI symposium in January that focused on 5 key areas: student success, enrollment marketing, operational efficiency, research innovation, and curriculum integration. Sonia Flam is the director of CX CRM offerings at Cognizant, where she's responsible for managing the portfolio of offerings and accelerators within CX CRM practice across a variety of domains, industries, and platforms. A key focus area for Cognizant's offerings is leveraging data and AI to enable Cognizant clients to accelerate business outcomes and win in their industry. In addition to her role for Cognizant, Sonia is the group leader for the Missoula Salesforce user group and aspires to bring more attention and jobs to Montana through Salesforce education and outreach. Don't ask me to say all that twice. And now we have Joel Henry. He's a partner at Hall Booth Smith, PC, located in Missoula office. Dr. Henry brings the unique ability to understand and integrate technology, business, and financial knowledge into solutions for clients. He is one of less than 5 people in the United States with both a PhD in computer science and a JD degree. Joel is one of the leading experts in Montana and nationwide on cryptocurrency and blockchain technology law. A significant area of his practice also includes complex cutting-edge legal matters around new technologies, including artificial intelligence, self-controlled vehicles, intellectual property, and data privacy and security. And with that, Zach, you're up.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Zach. I'm the Chief Information Officer at the University of Montana. For those who might not know what a Chief Information Officer does, I oversee all IT on this campus, from how to submit grades to the back end of supporting that. So it's lovely to be here today. I kind of want to just briefly start with gauging their audience around AI and the comfortability around it. So AI isn't anything new. It's been around for ages, decades even. If you remember, if you've ever gone to a website and a little thing pops up around a chatbot, I mean, that's the simplest of how I can explain what AI used to be. Now, through technological advances and things that are way beyond my level of thinking, we have seen huge advances over the last few years with artificial intelligence. And I wrote some numbers down. If you want the actual source, I can deliver it. But IBM Research, so this is give an example of how fast AI has grown. So 100 million users. So it took Facebook 5 years to eclipse 500, or excuse me, took Facebook 5 years to eclipse 100 million users. The internet, 8 years. Television, 38 years. Telephone, 75 years. There's a tool called ChatGPT, which is a generative AI tool out there. 2 months it took for them to reach 100 million users. So I share that with you all as a way of saying it's growing and blowing up in the last few years. If I could also share, again, another brief history with 2 different products or software out there. First is Wikipedia. When Wikipedia first came out, and I still remember this as being told I could never use Wikipedia when writing papers. You can't source it because it's all human generated and you can't trust it. AI is human generated with fed data by a human. So there are problems with that, meaning there could be hallucinations, which is incorrect or misleading information when it comes to trying to generate results from generative AI. However, for those savvy people who have used Wikipedia know that most of the time there's sources and citations. You can click those, you can go down and do some digging and research of your own. I've always used Wikipedia as a way to kind of get my brain to start thinking, and then I start diving into those citations and sources to actually get to the bottom of that research. Same can be done with generative AI. It just requires a little bit more extra work and critical thinking and prompt writing, which we can get into in a bit. The next one is, and it kind of dovetails into search engines. When Google and Yahoo and everything else came out, or Ask Jeeves came out with the search engine, you know, when it first came out, people were asking it questions, and it took a while for it to start understanding what the results were. Now it's so sophisticated that you can ask it, and it'll even have a predictive model of what you're trying to ask it. It's similar to generative AI, where your response is only be as good as your prompt. And when I say prompt, it's, and I'll give an example. I need a role description written for a network technician. It can generate a whole list of things for me. But if I said, I need a network technician at the University of Montana that needs to have 2 to 5 years of experience working on this thing, and they need to know how to pull cable, run fiber, blah, 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 you would get a much more sophisticated answer given the prompt that you wrote. So I share all that as a general kind of high-level overview of the sophistication behind AI, but also there's some scariness. I mean, it's human-generated. It is fed data. Your data is only as good as you put it in. So there are bias, which requires a little bit of critical thinking in the sense that you need to understand, hey, this news source or the thing I'm getting might not be the most correct. And I jokingly joke about this, about, well, look at our news sources in the media. No offense, NBC Montana. You all watch different news sources, CNN, NBC, Fox News, blah, blah, blah. Those are all biased in their own ways. It's how you kind of interpret and kind of go through that bias. That's the same with generative AI. So as this thing started booming, we at the University of Montana, we took an approach where we weren't going to put up guardrails to try stifling innovation and try preventing it. Instead, we're trying to embrace it. As mentioned in the biography thing, we held an AI symposium, and it focused on 5 areas. And I'll just quickly go through it just to give examples as what we're looking at in the sense of AI. So first was around student success. How can we help ensure that the students who come to the University of Montana are successful? We can help retain them and help them get to graduation. Well, there's tools out there that we could use, like digital tutoring. Being able to grab a faculty's, say, their syllabus and all their information and create a digital tutor that is actually catered to that faculty member or that person could very much benefit a student who's going in and possibly had a family emergency, missed a few weeks, needs to get caught up. The same sense as for our student advisors. We have really a rock star student advising community, but they're also, overworked and overburdened sometimes. And so wouldn't it be great if we had a tool that took care of I would say the 85% do-gooders on our campus of students who just need a PIN number to register for the next classes? Wouldn't it be great if we had a tool that just automatically registered them based on a few questions and prompts from a chatbot back and forth? So those are some of those things in the student success area that we're looking at on how we can be innovative to not eliminate jobs, because I do not like that phrase when it comes to AI, but it's augmenting those day-to-day tasks that are a little bit painful that could be streamlined by a, bot. Enrollment marketing, I won't get really down into the technical weeds, but leveraging tools out there that can kind of help pinpoint where are we missing the mark as far as market research goes? Are there areas of the United States that we could be recruiting to for students that we're not quite hitting? Operational efficiency, and this one is a little bit near and dear to my heart since we're both kind of academic and operational. So I'll dive into a use case here in a couple minutes, so I'll take a step back. Research innovation, looking at tools and research opportunities for our research faculty to dive more into the AI world. And then curriculum integration, how do we adopt or integrate AI into our curriculum? Now this one was a quite interesting topic. When we did the symposium, we had faculty in a working group and we talked through, and there's a lot of concern about students using AI or the perceived notion of it's lazy, things of that nature. And I kind of push back on the sense that people want to call the word AI lazy, because I think you can leverage it in a way that can increase your productivity as a human. It's as silly as it sounds, but I've used it a lot in my just personal day-to-day things. And I even sat down with my 10-year-old last week because he's really into chess right now. And we're trying to beat this, it's called like a grandmaster chess bot on the internet. And we used actual ChatGPT to help us try coming up with creative strategies on how we do that. Chess is way over my head. But to go back to operational efficiency real quickly, and I'll end it with this. So we're looking at things and methods on how can we increase the productivity of staff, but also reduce that workload burden. And I'll give an example real fast. So we have to do these processes called a request for proposal, RFP. Typically, sometimes that can take up to 6 weeks in writing, drafting, publishing, posting, all that fun stuff. Wouldn't it be great if we could take the template that the state provides us, put it into a large language model, Gen AI, and put it in, and we can spit it out. So we have a kind of a test case right now where we take all that information, spit it out, and if I need an RFP on IT consulting services, it can spit out that template in less than 10 minutes for me. So it takes a chunk of 6 weeks down to a few minutes, if you will. So anyways, I thank you for your time, and I'll pass it on over.
Awesome. Let's see. Is that on? Okay. I think it's on. Yes. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Zach. As mentioned earlier, my name is Sonia. I am a director at Cognizant. For those of you who may not be familiar with Cognizant, we are a multi-billion-dollar technology company. We provide technology services and consulting to other large businesses. So my role today, I'm out of over almost 400,000 employees at Cognizant. I work within a business group that's focused on platforms, specifically platforms like Salesforce, Adobe, Genesys. And so we're really working with customers to understand how can they transform the way that they do business with their customers, and really focusing in on the customer experience and the employee experience. And so one of the things that I do is I actually help build solutions for our customers to help them accelerate those things. And as mentioned, one of the things we really look at is how do you leverage data and AI within a company to really help them realize their business, and help them understand what can they do to really serve their customers and be able to accelerate the outcomes that they want to do within their company. And so depending on what type of business it is, a lot of times we're looking across different segments. And what I'm going to talk about today is not only how we help our customers embrace AI and data with a lot of the use cases that Zach was just talking about, but also how Cognizant is leveraging it internally as well. There's a lot of cool things that we have done internally that we are now taking to our customers to help them learn how to leverage it as well. And I'll talk a bit about some of the challenges that no matter if you're a small business or a large business, it's prevalent in all those different segments. So, but as I mentioned, like I work within a business unit within Cognizant. We're really focused on building these solutions. And one of the things that we really focus in on is, what are the challenges that a business is trying to solve for? So when we're looking at data and AI, it's across all different segments from sales, operations, product development, HR. It's funny, like a lot of the things that you mentioned from a sales perspective, we are on the other end of an RFP where we're actually responding to those, where we're actually trying to consolidate the answers. And a lot of that stuff is something that's repetitive. When you have an RFP, a lot of times, they're asking for how can you as a technology services company provide the services that we need. And a lot of times it's the same information over and over again that we're responding to. And it will take us, like it takes them 6 weeks, it takes us around 6 weeks to respond to that. And so how do we internally consolidate that information to actually automate that process? Because again, it's not necessarily replacing jobs, but it is trying to augment and optimize everybody's jobs as well. So some of the things that we've done internally, as I mentioned, we've done things where we're actually implementing Microsoft Copilot. So that's for every employee today. They have the opportunity to leverage that, which is, automation of creating documents like a PowerPoint. It also helps you automate your emails in Microsoft Outlook. So it's been something that's been empowering for our employees. Again, not necessarily replacing anything that they do, but just helping them do their jobs better each day. We also are looking at different things where we actually have our own technologies internally. So how do we optimize the process of creating a product? So if you're working with a technology company and they're trying to figure out how to test and automate to make sure what they're going to release. I know we all probably heard about the CrowdStrike incident a couple weeks ago. So some of the things that we do is actually, how do you actually test those things out so that that doesn't happen? And so that's another segment that we have actually our own internal products that we help leverage for those types of implementations. And then something very specifically that I'm actually working on is Salesforce, which is a CRM, customer relationship management tool, or platform, I should say. What we're doing is we're actually leveraging their AI products. And so this is really sales focused, where we're figuring out, okay, as a salesperson that works in a 300,000+ employee place, it's hard to know what are the services that we deliver across that entire business. How do we go to a company like Pepsi and tell them, here are all the different things that we can do for you to help your business? And it's a really hard job for our salespeople to be able to aggregate all that information, find the right person to reach out to be able to say, tell me how we can implement this or service our customers. And so what we're doing is we're figuring out, using Salesforce, when a sales rep goes into the system, they actually get recommendations. There's a white space analysis that says, hey, based off of this account, what you've sold before and what you maybe sold into other accounts that's worked, here are some products and services that you should actually recommend to that customer. And now here, let me automate an email for you so that you can send that out to the customer. And I will go ahead and also recommend times to be able to set up a client conversation with them. And so we're doing all this automation within one single system so that we can, again, enable our salespeople so that they're better at their jobs and they can actually focus on the customer and they're not spending all their time trying to figure out who do I reach out to, how do I write the right email, how do I just make myself sound smart. And so it really is an interesting process that we have. And a lot of this, again, is really focused on that customer experience, employee experience. Like, we want to make sure our employees have the best experience possible that they can have when they're doing their jobs. So they don't feel burdened, especially, again, in a large company. There's a lot of operations, there's a lot of noise. So how can we reduce that for them? And then also, how can we make sure when we are communicating, working with our customers, that it's a really great experience so they want to come back to us more and more. And so what we've done is we're taking these lessons learned and what we're doing internally, and we are applying it with our customers that we work with as well. So again, they're looking at how do I optimize my sales processes and make sure that I am, building a healthy pipeline and generating revenue. How do I make sure that my HR processes, like my managers, aren't burdened by doing mundane tasks? Instead, they're actually working with their employees to make sure that their employees are getting what they need. How do I make sure that from a service perspective, when I have a customer call in with a complaint, how do I make sure I am addressing that complaint correctly? I need to have the right information at the right time. I'm not going to have somebody call me and tell me my cable isn't working and I tell them, use your, do something else. And so it's really figuring out how do you get the right knowledge articles in front of the right people. And reduce that service time when you are working with your customers and they're calling in. Because again, it's all about reducing that customer churn, keeping that customer experience really at the best that it can be. And so across the board, we're working across all these different businesses in terms of, what can we do from an AI perspective and really leveraging data and AI. One of the biggest challenges that we face, though, because there's so many different use cases that you can tackle, is, how do you figure out what you should prioritize first? And so it's really important to work with the right stakeholders across the business to really figure out how you're going to prioritize accordingly. And then also measuring how you're going to measure the success of that. Because we see a lot of businesses kind of doing some AI here and doing some AI here, and it's all in different segments of the business, and there isn't this kind of centralized view of how do we make sure that we're actually accomplishing what we need to accomplish to help the business grow. And that, again, that's not something that's unique to a large enterprise. That's something that every business needs to focus in on, is like, who do you work with to really make sure that you're making the right decisions? And then Joel here will talk a little bit about, or a lot about, what are the considerations from a governance perspective and making sure that you are accessing that data and leveraging that data appropriately and the potential legal concerns around it. Because that is another big piece that, for us internally, it takes us a long time to sometimes implement these solutions because we have to be very careful. We are a public company and we have to be careful about how we use our information and how it's accessed. And so it's another big consideration. So again, looking at your use cases, how you're going to achieve those use cases and measure those outcomes is a big thing. And then again, how you're actually going to govern that entire program is another big piece. So happy to answer any questions. I know, again, I'm coming from the view of not necessarily local to Missoula, but more like that global view. But again, a lot of it applies no matter if you're local or global because, AI is impacting our daily lives. And as Zach mentioned, there's a lot of different use cases that the University of Montana is tackling that, we're seeing at large global companies as well. So appreciate the time today.
Well, thanks, you guys. That was a great introduction, great discussion. And thanks for the nice introduction. The one thing I do have to say, though, is that it said that our wisdom was infinite. And I can tell you that my wife, watching me do a project this weekend, can tell you my knowledge is definitely finite. Okay, definitely finite. And I kept telling her it's all under control, but she kept seeing the wood on the floor, and she was sort of thinking the data points were different. I think that was a really nice introduction. I was a computer science professor for 16 years, and then I used my sabbatical to go to law school. And that was a really good idea till you actually had to do it, right? It's like saying, let's go backpacking, and I think 45 miles sounds like a good amount. And at about mile 30, you're like, who came up with this idea of walking 45 miles with this on my back? But it has given me a really interesting career path. And I find that lawyers that actually know something about math and science are kind of rare. They might not be unicorns, but there are not that many more of them than there are unicorns, maybe. And so I end up with some really interesting clients and interesting issues. But I would say I stand by my statement there. It's kind of a couple that's not quite yet ready for prime time, even though it is in prime time. And I'm going to talk here just briefly about why. So everybody's all excited about AI, right? Because in my instance, I was looking for a particular kind of a fishing shirt. I wasn't finding one at a price point I liked. And then a few days later, suddenly, you know, on Amazon or on whatever platform I was on, it came up and said, hey, you're an REI member, and there's a shirt like the one you were looking at, and now it's on sale for 40% off. And in a way, that's pretty creepy, but in another way, like, that's okay. I wanted the shirt. I probably wouldn't have found it, and I got it, right? So I was kind of okay with that. On the other hand, it comes up with other ads and other suggestions that I'm not quite as happy with because, you know, I went to Target to buy some medical whatever, and I really don't think that's something I need a suggestion on, especially since it wasn't for me. So there are some of those things I don't like very much, right? So there is a lot of excitement and a lot of positive, but there's also some of this creepy stuff, right? And that's where all the questions come from, right? How do we use this? How do we get the most out of it? Should we be scared of it? Is it going to turn my car on in the middle of the night? Or is it going to apply the brakes while I'm going somewhere? Or, you know, what's it going to do to me? And it does seem kind of weird, right? Because a number of years ago, that a large city in Tennessee was using artificial intelligence to predict when to ramp up electrical power for the community. And they were collecting data about how much electricity people in the community use. And if you think about that for a minute, the way you do that is when you get up in the morning, you turn on a light. You might turn on the stove. You might turn on the hot water for your electric hot water heater. If I could detect that in every household in Missoula, I would be able to predict how much energy I need and at what time of the day I need it, right? And if I cross-reference that with the weather forecast, I could even more so predict when we need electricity, when we need gas, and all the rest. And if that could drive a 5% or 10% reduction in our energy consumption, I would hope everybody in here would stand up and say, that's a good idea, right? Why not? Would you like to use 5% or 10% less and have that in your pocket? Would you like your community to? We probably would. Would we want to do that if they could tell when you turned on your shower in the morning? Or your water the first time you flush the toilet? Is that too personal? If it was aggregated so we didn't know it was you, but we knew it was people on your street, would that be okay? Those are the questions I have to tackle, right? And so what I end up with was a lot of this kind of thing, right? Like, okay, what do we do here? So I'm not a litigator. I never go to court. I never wanted to go to court. I have enough arguments with other lawyers every day. I don't need to go to court and exacerbate that, right? So I do a lot of contracts. I form a lot of businesses. I help them get their investment and all the rest. And this AI piece is a big piece of it. So let me give you an example. I have a client who does facial recognition for cattle. And this is a great space to be in because I can tell you how many privacy laws there are for facial recognition for cattle. None. How about you? Lots, right? And so I end up with these questions. Who built the software? So let's say Zach built it. He's a pretty talented guy. He built the software. But who owns it? Well, Bill down here, he's a big company, and so he bought the rights to it. But he doesn't really sell it, so he hires Sonia to sell it. So now where does all that responsibility fall, right? Zach built it, so he knows how the software works. Bill owns it, so he's kind of responsible for it. And then it's up to Sonia to sell it, right? So let's say she says, man, I have this opportunity to sell to 50 horse racing tracks around the country. If it can recognize cattle, it can recognize horses, right? So when she sells it and it doesn't recognize horses and people sign up one horse but race another, and people bet hundreds of thousands of dollars on these races, and we find out they were cheating because the software didn't work, somebody's walking around with a noose, and they're looking for a neck to put it on, right? So those are the things that I have to worry about. But the problem with artificial intelligence and its power is that it runs on data. It runs on data. There we go. So let's say Zach builds the facial recognition for cattle. He feeds into it all the pictures of red Angus cows he can find. And it works really great. It's like 97% accurate, right? And Bill has bought it, and Sonia wants to sell it, and we say, no, you can't sell it to horses. So she goes and sells it in Ireland, where they raise all these cattle called Galloways. And they feed it all the data, but it's not very accurate. Why? Because they all look the same. I know red Angus probably do to us, but they look the same, and it's not that accurate. Now, whose fault is that? Is it Zach's? He built software and it worked this one place. Is it the data? Where did I get the data and what did I put in it, right? And so if it's not that accurate because we put different data in it, even if it isn't junk data, even if it's good data, and then it doesn't work, who's in trouble for that, correct? So those are the kinds of things that when I'm setting up contracts and putting businesses in place, we want to make sure the right responsibility is on the right person, and investors are really interested before they write checks with several commas in that we get this stuff exactly right. And if it's not, they often start with a noose at my neck instead of these guys, okay? So let me give you another example, and I was thinking of this over the weekend. I think everybody in here would say I would want less trash on the Clark Fork River, right? Everybody would like that. We don't need to find broken bottles and beer cans and stuff all over the place. Well, what if I put an artificial intelligence system in place so that I could tell if somebody bought an 8-pack of Kettle House Double Haul and then drove their car out by the golf course, right, out here at Charlotte, whatever it is out there, and jumped in. But then I've got the Ring cameras tracking the car, and then I've got people's social media pictures, and from those social media pictures, I can kind of tell, you know, how deep in the water the cooler is, so I can kind of see how much beer they drank. And then when they get out down here by the Paddlehead Stadium, they only throw away 6 cans of beer. What happened to the other 2? And my artificial intelligence could say, that cooler was this low in the water when it had 8 cans in. Those cans are all gone, but there's only 8 in the trash can. We just go ahead and mail that person a ticket? No, yes? Maybe I need a little more data. Maybe I need to say, I saw where they put one in a can in the water. I'm not sure they pulled it out. I don't have a camera from that angle. Is that enough information? When is enough, right? So therein, to me, lies the issues, right? Good software, good data for the right purpose, and to protect the people that want to use it so it's used just for that purpose. And that's where I, let's just say, keep myself out of trouble most days, is working in that area. So thank you all for being here and laughing at my silly jokes. My wife wasn't laughing, I can guarantee. But thank you.
All right, so I know everyone's just loaded with questions right now. However, we have to wait. Okay, so this is the moment in time that we do a break. Table Talk is a very rich part of what City Club Forum is about, and arguably the gist of why we're here. So we'll take about 10 minutes to introduce yourselves at the table, assign a table ambassador. For those that are questioning, well, what does a table ambassador do? They are the chosen one. So they are the ones that get to ask the single question your table comes up with. So to that ambassador, I ask, please keep it short, try and get right to the question. When you stand, introduce yourself. Please limit your autobiography. Appreciate you, but we try and get through a bunch of questions. You can see there's a lot. So if you can, we'll take about 10 minutes. We'll be right back and get after it. Okay, so we will get this started back up. Oh, my time's up already? Okay, so as I said at the beginning, we're committed to civil discourse. So we ask that you keep your questions respectful and that you avoid making statements. Also, as you can see from the attendance, we've got a large number of people in the crowd. Everyone has a question, I'm sure. So please get to the question as quickly as possible. We ask members of the media to save their questions until the end. Our panelists should be able to stick around for a few minutes afterwards. When asking your question, please stand up, clearly state your name, okay? And we will have 2 board members walking around with the mics. Please don't grab it, they'll hold it for you. So with that, we will get going. So we'll start over there.
Oh, great, perfect. Hi, I'm Kira Heck with Community Health Alliance, and we recognize that you all kind of noted that AI is not replacing people. We're interested in thinking about our workforce and reflecting on what that looks like and how that might change going forward. We're wondering if you are seeing any dedicated efforts or certain areas that might be or are being more affected by AI, such as certain positions or sectors.
So we, not officially at UM or anything like that, but what I am seeing right now is executive assistants and like secretaries of those types of positions can be impacted. There's a lot of AI tools right now that you could use to actually use for a scheduling assistant. So there's one called Maisie or not Maisie, whatever. And so there's a tool that you can basically set up to where it'll look at your calendar and you can say, hey, AI tool, tell me what my next available schedule is and schedule with Joel. And it'll go and actually send out a calendar invite, set up the Zoom meeting, set up everything and things of that nature. So do I think it's going to fully replace like what an executive assistant or a secretary could do? No. But I do think, and this is kind of where I really work with my staff on, is the work-life balance. If your job can be a little bit easier because we're using tools to help augment some of those really kind of silly tasks, then hopefully at the end of the day, you can just go home and turn your brain off and not have to worry about work. So that's kind of where I'm really pushing, where to leverage AI tools is let's make your job easier so then you can just go home and actually sleep at night and not have to stress.
Is this on? I think it's on. Yeah, and I think another thing to add is just like, again, I mentioned like the service, like a contact center. That's another area where we're seeing impacted. Again, not always replacing a job, but like kind of those level 1 requests that are coming in that can be easily answered or responded to, like updating your credit card information. That's what we're seeing AI come in and replace the need for a human intervention.
Hi, I'm Craig Stahlberg with the Missoula Housing Authority. We were thinking about some of the examples you gave, and if you think about it as a local Missoula business of that scale, what are the areas where, or what are some examples maybe where different facets of an operation, sales, HR, accounting, et cetera, could see benefit from using AI?
I think a really common scenario is like billing. So like if you have accounts receivable, accounts payable, like being able to automate that process through AI, as well as being able to kind of detect if there's any discrepancies. So if you're a company that delivers, a product over and over again, being able to automate that process so that somebody doesn't have to be the one that's actually sending those invoices out the door, or the person that's actually collecting the payment, and just making sure that's automatically applied. So that's something that's super easy, and most businesses, small or big, have to do. And it also kind of to give you some peace of mind, because one of the beauties of AI, there can be errors, but it's supposed to reduce the human error element too. So if you have any kind of element with like billing, it's kind of an easy one sometimes for people to start tackling.
around data analytics. So in your case, if you have historical data that you've been collecting about like the housing prices in Missoula, like you could actually run some data analytics and have a tool help you come up with trends and figure out things. And like I do this for my own personal self around like budget forecasting and things like that, to where it's like, all right, here's what I'm expecting in the next 12 months. Like, help me think through this. And sometimes it's not like, I'm not advocating that it's a financial advisor, but it's a way to help, for me, brainstorm and come up with some ideas of like, all right, this is what I need to cut back on. So
I would just add, I think that if you could integrate data in an anonymized form, and by that I mean it doesn't say, you know, Joe Smith bought these things at Albertsons, and that Joe Smith went to these 3 places today, and then the next day Joe Smith went somewhere else. What I mean is that if you could say, well, the folks who go to breweries typically stay there about this long, and maybe those folks who are in these age groups go to these kind of restaurants afterward, you know, then you can maybe put that data together to promote a restaurant, promote the brewery, show the connection between the two, and not to mention safety factors, right? Like, you know, that might indicate to us that we need more Ubers or more safe, you know, drive home or whatever it is. And if we could put that data together in an anonymized form so they don't know, you know, when Joel goes to the brewery, although if you're around much, you could probably put that together pretty fast. I'm a beer nerd. So anyway, that to me seems like a really good way to help local businesses without giving up our privacy, so to speak.
Hi, Steve Schmidt with Drive Safe Missoula. We've heard that there's been a significant increase in the energy use as it comes to AI. Do you know what the world is doing from a climate change perspective to reduce the energy that's being used for all the AI prompts that are being generated?
that's a great question. I don't really have the answer for you on that one. I can just say, from my perspective in some areas, a lot of data centers that are getting built across the United States, they tend to be more green in the sense that they use outside air cooling instead of consuming water and other things. And I use our data center as an example at the University of Montana, where we consume very little water to almost no water. We just use outside air cooling to keep a data center cool. So we're not consuming as much, and we're basically recycling our own air inside the data center. Now, as far as the actual power consumption and usage, I'm not qualified to answer that. However, I would say, yeah, actually, I'm just going to stop it at that.
I can speak to that from just one data point. I'm involved with a group of attorneys that is putting a data center in Ohio. And just to give you the idea of the scale, the order from Hewlett-Packard was $238 million. I can also tell you that the majority of acreage on the site is dedicated to solar power. But I can also tell you that the solar power that will be produced there is not a large percentage of what power is going to be used at that site. So it's an offset, and even in my mind, I'm glad it's there, but it's not such a significant offsite that we would be relieved by that, right? And the same thing, I represent some folks who do cryptocurrency mining, and that just takes an inordinate amount of electricity and power. The computers, you know, these things for us, they use the CPUs maybe, Zach, 15, 20% of the time. And those cryptocurrency mining, they're using their CPUs like 96, 98% of the time. It's the whole game is running the CPU all the time. And so it's disheartening in some ways. We haven't come up with better technology. Hopefully we will. It'd be nice to use the heat that comes out of those for something more positive than a problem to dissipate.
David Gray with DVG Architects. How does AI learn?
I could start. Okay. So I was thinking about this question before I came here today because, quite frankly, my 7-year-old daughter asked me the other day, like, how do you know all the things that you know? And I thought that was really nice of her. And she's given me more credit than maybe I deserve. But I think a good analogy to this is that we all learn as we are more exposed to more information and more data, more theories, more solution methods, and we integrate those into our whole, and then we have sort of a limited ability to keep those facts together, as my wife will tell me when I can't remember what, color we're going to paint our bedroom. And I think that AI does the same thing. If we give these artificial intelligence systems information, data, they learn from those and put them together. Now, whether they put together in the right way is a different question, but I would also say sometimes we don't put things together in the right way either, but that's how they're learning. It's just absorbing the data, relating the data to each other, and putting those pieces in place to learn things. And just like my example with cattle, I could know a heck of a lot about raising black Angus cattle in Wyoming, but if you ship me to Brazil, I'm going to probably be a fish out of water. So it's all about that. You guys want to add?
Yeah, that's great. Hi, I'm Dan Hubing, and I teach technology classes at the library and am involved with the Makerspace. Our question here has to do with artists and intellectual property. What can an artist do today to help that person in whatever art they're involved in?
Sorry, this sounds like a Joel question.
Yeah.
So, I think in terms of an artist, as soon as an artist puts something out in any kind of public space, they should make absolutely certain that they put copyright or something on it right away. That at least establishes their rights. On the other hand, the way that copyright works is that if you create some kind of an image or a video, and I take that and I make changes to it, there is a certain point when I've made enough changes to it that it's called a derivative work. It's different, right? I can even take copyright protected work, put it together in a different way, and that whole thing then is newly created work. So it's a real balance in terms of the ability to create, right, and protect, but also create more, right, to keep going. So I think my advice, or at least my advice, and I represent some filmmakers in the area, is to make absolutely certain you claim your rights when you put it out there. And then secondly, you just have to be diligent looking to see if somebody's trying to knock that off. And just like, the Chicago Bears who send people out in the parking lot to stop people from selling shirts that they're not paying a royalty on, it's the same sort of thing. I don't have a better answer, and it's very, very frustrating at times.
I will say from a different point of view, it's really fun. Someone who is not artistic, but has some really silly ideas, to be able to use AI to be like, hey, take a picture of a grizzly bear holding a football, throwing it to a bobcat or something like that. Like, it generates that kind of thing. And so I'm not artistic. And the other fun kind of stuff I like to do is like, oh, I want to write a country song about, the University of Montana, and I can go to a tool, write the lyrics, have it help me write the lyrics, and then put it in another tool, and it actually spit out a whole song about the university. It's kind of fascinating. But in regards to like data, like here's a good example is, so I asked it to help me write a poem about the University of Montana president, Seth Bodnar, and then we'll write a song about it. And apparently there's a lot of Seth Bodnars out in the world. And I created what I think is a superhuman, because it pulled together bios from about 4 or 5 different people and put it into a poem. And so I brought it to President Bodnar. I said, hey, does this sound like you? And he goes, wow, I've never been to Georgia Tech. I've never done these things. And it was just so fascinating. But then we threw it into a hip hop song, and it was really funny. So like, as someone who's not artistic, it helped me be a little bit more creative and anyways, and it's fun to use it with my team too. So we come up with little art challenges and things like that of like, just to have some fun. So.
Hello, Charlie with Charlie Stores with AMP Global Strategies. How do we ensure AI systems remain unbiased and ethical, especially when it comes to healthcare, media, sports? Is that and basically healthcare? When you're young, AI may say, "Yeah, let's help save that guy," but when you're old, they're going, maybe there's a bias in there for not providing that, that level of care. How do we get around those biases?
That's mine. I think that's a really good question, and I'm not sure how exactly to do that. And I can give you an example. I have a client who is building an AI system to help screen loan applications. And we found that it was highly biased because it was using things like social media posts, how much you use Venmo, whether you use tap to pay. And I could tell you that I have two parents who wouldn't pay that way at gunpoint. They wouldn't pay their local grocer by putting their phone anywhere near whatever that device is. So it was highly biased in that way. So to answer your question, I think it's twofold. It has to be, the artificial intelligence has to be able to recalibrate itself to its answer as it learns and becomes more accurate. But we also have to make sure that we provide a data set that it itself is not narrow or even biased in its data collection, right? Now you can get away from that somehow by saying this is a loan screener for people between the ages of 25 and 35. Okay, I get that, right? They're playing by Venmo and all the rest. So I think that's tough. And healthcare, I think, is also difficult, right? Like if you're a physician's assistant and you put in the symptoms and you're supervising a physician is not even on site. In some states, they don't have to be on site. Would you trust artificial intelligence to come back and say, send this person to the hospital? Or would you trust them to say, yeah, here's a prescription. Why don't you call me Monday if you don't feel well? Well, what if something goes bad over the weekend, the person dies? Is it the PA? Is it the supervising physician? Is it the AI? Was it what Zach wrote, or was it the data we put in it? Was it oversold? I think that's why I say I don't think some of these AI applications are quite ready for prime time until we kind of figure those out. And if you let us attorneys figure it out, the only people who walk away with new boats are us attorneys.
I'll just add that a lot of like the large healthcare companies that we do work for are very cautious in the use cases they're solving for. So to Joel's point, like because they are a regulated industry, they're very at least the use cases that we're looking at them with are very focused on like just automating tasks and like figuring out, for like a medical study, like how do we find the right candidates? And so it's very much looking in narrow-based use cases right now. And then I think to Joel's point, some things are just not ready for prime time, and they're very acknowledging of that they can't really solve all their use cases right now like some of the other industries can.
Yeah, I'm Bert Caldwell, and our question is, in simple terms, can you tell us the difference between human intelligence and artificial intelligence, and follow that with when you think artificial intelligence will be ready for prime time?
You want to take the first part? How about if I do a quick opinion and then these guys can in terms of the difference? I think artificial intelligence and human intelligence differ in the following. I think artificial intelligence is going to be more repeatable than human intelligence. I think artificial intelligence can take into account far more data and more relationships than we can. We just can't keep all those things in our head, right? Like I've fished the Blackfoot hundreds of times, right? And I'm sure I was out on a day that was very much like the day I went out in June. But I can't really remember that day's river flow, its wind speed, the amount of sunlight, whether it was cloudy, right, whether the water temperature was, and all that stuff. Artificial intelligence can repeat that every time over and over again. So I think that's the case, but I do think that human intelligence is able to pull in things artificial intelligence is not able to do in terms of trade-offs, dangers, risks, and all the rest, right? You know, artificial intelligence may say if there's two people walking across the street and there's a bus full of 30 people, should we run the bus off the road to save the two people, or should we not do that because of the 30 people on the bus? Whereas human intelligence might say, you know, there's a way that we can get the bus stopped. It'll still injure people, but it wouldn't kill anyone else. And that may not be able to make those kind of ethical, on-the-spot decisions. So.
Yeah, to that point, common sense. Human intelligence has common sense to make a decision versus artificial intelligence can sometimes give you a really stupid recommendation, to put it honestly.
Yeah, I think one of the areas where it lacks is emotional intelligence, and I've used it in a way to where I will craft an email to a response where we might be into a disagreement about something, and I'll take my email and I'll put it into a chat GPT and I'll ask it to rewrite it in different I say different tones. Write it in a very sympathetic tone. Write it into a very authoritative, like, no, this is how it's going to be tone. And it can get there, but it would have taken, you know, a human with emotional intelligence to actually figure out, like, all right, this is how this needs to be crafted. I think that's what's lacking in some areas. But to answer your question, when will it surpass? A year? I mean, I don't know. It's kind of scary to think about what the future could hold, just how fast the technology has advanced in the last 2 years to where it could be in the next 5 if those lawyers don't get involved.
Sometimes we help solve problems.
Hello, Ariana Skrootvold with Western Montana's Glacier Country, and we have a question for Joel. So we're wondering what other countries are leading the way in AI law, and if there are laws or policies we should pay attention to.
Yeah, and I think we talked about that in the break. I think the European Union is at least starting in that direction. And I think I can't say whether they're going to be, you know, right, wrong, better, worse. But in this field, I'd rather watch someone else give it a whirl. And then we can decide kind of what to do next. But the EU is definitely, and they've been ahead of us in other areas, right? In data protection and privacy. They've gone into, you know, software monopolies. Google does this to you whether you ask your phone to do it or not. Microsoft replaces your web browser. So they've been kind of ahead of us in that regard. So I really do think the European Union, and I'm happy to let them go try a few things, and then we'll see where it goes. Yeah.
Oh, you hold it. Okay. Hi, my name is Angie Thompson. I'm with the University of Montana, and we're with Career Services, and we're finding we serve on some tech committees that are national, international, and there's a lot of resistance that we're finding in Montana to kind of like embrace AI, and the reason that that's a little concerning is just because other universities seem to be kind of like really growing in this, embracing and like moving on. So what do you think, I don't know if you've seen that resistance, but what do you think the outcomes of this could be, like in terms of economic growth, job opportunities, technological advancements? Are you encountering this?
Yes. Yeah, you know, what worries me a little bit, and because it is kind of fresh and new, but if you watch across the United States and other higher ed institutions, there's already bachelor's degrees for artificial intelligence. There's classes being written right now for prompt writing engineering and things like that. And if you look at the top career fields right now, prompt engineering is like top 3, I think, right now. And which is kind of not silly, but scary in a way where how fast people can pivot and turn. And that's what I think our university is working towards, is pivoting and making that change. But there's also, I think, for at least myself personally, we still have we still have that right to caution things and question things. And I think with that civil dialogue that we have on our campus, I do appreciate that we do have some people who are very against it and anti-AI because of one reason or the other. And, you know, I do think with terms of bias and whatnot, it is, it's a barrier in some areas. And I think we've seen it with Arizona State University law and University, I believe, Michigan law, where one of them allowed AI written cover letters to be submitted and one that does not. And what they found at the one that was written by AI had I might butcher this, so apologies, but it was higher acceptance rate because it took people who might have been coming from more underprivileged areas or maybe not native English speakers to be able to take that and turn it into a professionally crafted email versus those who are just writing it humanly. So I do think there's advantages to help, you know, with that equity problem. But also in bias, that's, I think, where I see my biggest concern is if I'm a Native American student trying to do stuff with AI, is it actually going to have bias towards, you know, a white person or an indigenous person, things like that. And I think that's kind of where we're seeing that.
I would just add briefly that I am seeing some pushback from that, especially in the ag industry. And as long as you don't use the words artificial and intelligence in the same sentence, you can push some solutions out to help cattle ranchers and others, because these systems can take, you know, 80 years of weather plus 80 years of stream flow plus 80 years of the cattle market plus et cetera, et cetera. And if you don't say artificial intelligence, but you give them some useful tools, it works.
Well, thank you, Zach, Sonia, and Joel. Wow, my mind's blown. So thank you. I'm sure everyone else is too here. So again, thank you to our sponsors, First Security Bank and Blackfoot Communications. And of course, thank you, our audience, for attending. Next month, we've already got that mapped out. So it is Missoula's Homefront, navigating affordability across the housing spectrum. So it will probably be a packed house. So I would get registered early. And just another reminder, it's hard for them to schedule all the lunches if we do it too late. So we're going to try and start cutting off lunches on Wednesday at noon before the forum. So if you want lunch at the next forum, you better get registered. Go do it right now. I'll wait. All right. No, I'm not going to wait because my time's up. So again, have a great day. Thank you to our panelists.